Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has defended the pace of the government's increases to the military budget as national security emerges as a key election issue. It comes after he confirmed he's open to Australian troops joining European countries in Ukraine if a peace deal is struck with Russia. Political reporter Olivia Casely joins us now on this. So Olivia, defence spending in the spotlight again after a senior Trump administration official says Canberra needs to do more.
So Elbridge Colby, he hasn't been confirmed yet, but ultimately he's going to be a leading figure in the Trump administration's Defence Department, and he's essentially calling on Australia to lift its spending on the military as a percentage of the economy. So he'd like to see that figure hitting 3% of gross domestic product. At the moment, the Australian government is spending about 2.02% of GDP on the military, so that equates to around $50 billion a year, but that is on an upwards trajectory, expected to hit close to $100 billion by the middle of next decade. A lot of this funding is going towards new equipment such as nuclear-powered submarines, long-range missiles, as well as Navy vessels. We have seen in the past week an increased focus and calls from the US to both its European partners and NATO allies to lift the spending on the military. So they want the European nations to lift their spend to 5%, which really is an enormous figure. But Mr. Colby here, this is the first time that we've heard Australia called out specifically, and he says ultimately the current spend is inadequate given the geostrategic circumstances in our neck of the woods in the Indo-Pacific. This was put to the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese a short time ago, and this is what he had to say.
Look, we determine our policy. And our defence policy is to increase our defence expenditure. That's what we're doing. And unlike the former government that made announcements with no money to back it up, we back it up with real dollars, real investment and real assets.
So Olivia, to what extent is defence going to be a prominent campaign issue when the federal election is called?
Well, I think it will naturally play a role given the febrile geostrategic environment on the world stage. And I think it's fair to say that defence is more in the spotlight, especially after we saw Chinese naval vessels beginning a circumnavigation of the continent and indeed holding live fire military exercises in the Tasman Sea, which caught the government unawares. Ultimately, as well, we have seen the United States over the weekend announcing that it will suspend military aid or support to Ukraine. So we are in a bit of a vastly changing situation. Ultimately, we did hear from Anthony Albanese earlier this week indicating that he'd be open to the idea of sending Australian troops over to Ukraine to help with peacekeeping exercises. When it comes to that crucial election timing, the Prime Minister was very much expected to be pulling that trigger over the course of this weekend. But of course, there's a natural disaster event pending with a cyclone Alfred. So it is very much still up in the air. The Prime Minister today was asked whether he would rule out calling an election this weekend, and this is what he had to say.
I'm focused, as much as some people here are focused on something else, I'm focused on the needs of Australians. This isn't a time for party politics. I'm just focused on doing my job and governing, and that's something I've been focused on since the 23rd of May 2022 when I was sworn in as Prime Minister.
Speaking with Labor sources, they say they'd much prefer to fight the election on domestic issues such as the cost of living and health, which of course are of massive significance to voters. But I think it's fair to say that national security and community safety will play a much bigger focus than perhaps either the opposition leader or Prime Minister could have imagined even a couple of months ago.
Political reporter Olivia Casely there in Canberra. Thank you.